So I'd just like to welcome Emma Harding, our speaker, to listen to my talk about technical content strategy and why it pays to be granular. And these are the distilled and possibly somewhat muddled ideas of someone who's spent years slaving over a hot keyboard. So here we go. So I thought I would tell you what the order of proceedings will be, so that you can get an idea of how soon this will end, because that's what I always think about when I'm in a presentation. We're going to start with an example so that you've got something concrete to visualise in your heads, and then we'll talk a little bit about technical content strategy, and I really am just skating across the top of it, and then I'll sum up with some take-homes, and then you can go home. So I'm going to start with the concrete example, which is a Streamliners example, because that's what I live and breathe. This is not the full picture of content at Streamliners, obviously. This is nothing to do with actually the products that we create in terms of actual customer websites and manuals. And it isn't even the full picture of all the knowledge bases we have, because we have some distinct products and some of them just aren't represented here. So there's no mention of GP docs or school docs. The documents that I want to talk about tonight are the Streamliners knowledge base, the Health Pathways Conventions, and the Health Pathways online help. And I want to talk about the technical content strategy that we have in place, at least in theory, for these documents. So I'm going to start with the knowledge base, and there's a tiny little picture of it, which you won't be able to read, but it gives you an idea of the fact that it's a thing. Here are the users, a nice androgynous set of users. The ones up the top, if you multiply it by about 3, that's our content developers working across the whole business. And then down below we've got the tech support team and some admin people, and management occasionally, I understand, do actually look at the knowledge base. I'm not sure that it's true, but it's a nice idea. Yeah. So the knowledge base is where people go for the leave policy, the leave form, the reimbursement form, how to install Snagit, not literally how to install Snagit, but what the serial number is, that kind of stuff. The knowledge base is quite a large piece of accumulated wisdom that needs a jolly good culling, probably. But it's policies and procedures for the entire company. And then we have another document. It's actually a separate document. It all comes out of the same database, but it's a separate site, as you can see up to the left, which is the Health Pathways Conventions. And if we look at the user group for them, we've got another blob of content developers, and that's not strictly sort of the number, but you get the idea. And then, some tech support people also access that knowledge. So, so far, the 2 documents that we've looked at are entirely used by internal people. And then we go to the Health Pathways Community Online Help, which is the 3rd document. Now, the users for the online help are the clinical editors and coordinators. Right, well, the coordinators are this group down here.
Is this the online help to help them use Health Pathways? It's not Health Pathways. This is supposed to help them use it.
Yes. So the bit I was just about to say, but thank you, Shanthony, because I might have forgotten, is that Health Pathways is a manual for general practitioners to navigate the health system. And this online help has nothing to do with that product. It's to do with another product that we use to administer Health Pathways. Mm-hmm. So we have a huge amount of feedback coming in every day, and that all has to be processed, and then there's a whole lot of other correspondence and information and functionality in this other system. I'm going to call it DOT, because that's what it's called. And the online help is to help the users navigate DOT.
Basically, everybody who's involved in implementing Health Pathways in their region, DOT is one part of it, but there's other tools as well. So, online help helps them, those Health Pathways regional teams, implement Health Pathways for GP users to then use Health Pathways.
Yes, that's right.
There's hundreds. There are hundreds.
There are, we have
Yeah.
well over 350 users on the Health Pathways community, all who can access it online help.
Right. So here's the system again, and now let's zoom in to the intersection set between the Health Pathways conventions and the online help. And yes, you're right, the Streamliners knowledge base was a red herring. It's got nothing to do with what I'm about to say. Potentially it does, because there is some overlap between the Health Pathways conventions and the Streamliners knowledge base, but we're not focusing on that tonight. So I did say this was an example, and there's nothing, when you've got an example, you really do want something concrete to look at. Here is a document. It's the same document for two different audiences. It's a procedure for, on the left, it's a procedure for the Health Pathways content developers on how to start a feedback thread. And on the right, it's exactly the same procedure, but for the audience of Adrian, CEs, clinical editors and coordinators of Health Pathways. And here are the bits that we've reused between those two different documents. So remember, they're coming out of one database, and there's lots of opportunity to reuse content between the two documents. The little bits that we've reused are images, sentences and paragraphs, hyperlinks, basically chunks. So we're reusing at quite a granular level, and that's the key, really.
What do you mean by reuse, Emma Harding? Do you mean copy and paste?
Yeah, that's a sacrificial question. I said to Ian, will you ask me sacrificial questions if I gloss over anything? Thank you. Reuse is a concept that I've internalised to such an extent that I forget that maybe other people haven't. So when I talk about reuse, I'm saying we write it once and then we use different methods to embed it, to link to it, to have it in multiple places without
Can I ask,
duplication.
when you're writing it, whatever it is, you're writing the sentence or the heading or whatever, will you always write it with the idea of it being reused?
Ideally.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes you have to revisit and tweak.
Yes, so that it's not
Yeah,
based,
because you say,
it's
actually, I want
linked to its context, that it can be
If I
reused.
just worded this slightly differently, I could actually use it in more places.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely. The joys of single sourcing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the little bit over here that I've just highlighted in this one, that note there, we're also reusing that, not between these two pages, but that note is actually in numerous pages for the online help. And the difference between the two procedures, why are they different? Well, it's the usual kind of difficult, annoying stuff that means you can't absolutely just share content with two different audiences. This audience on the left are people who are sitting at their computers, their own computers, working all day. When they go to the admin system, they're logged in as them. Whereas this audience might be using shared machines, and when they go to the system and send feedback or go to do something in the administration system, there's every chance that they're actually in there as another person, and they need to make sure that they log out and log in. So, yeah.
Is this how it physically renders on a screen?
Physical banding on screen, yeah. Well, is something physical if it's on the screen? Yes, it's a thing. Yeah, they've got different URLs. So you go, this is linked from one place, it's over there, and this is linked from another place, that's over there. Does that answer the question, Laura?
Sure.
Okay. So it's granular. Right. To be granular, you need a component content management system. There are many different sorts. By having a system that can cope with grains of content, you can more easily meet the needs of your technical content strategy, which we're going to come to in a moment. And I would say you can't do that with Word. You can't do it with Google Docs or Open Docs or SharePoint, especially not SharePoint. You can't do it with a wiki or an ordinary content management system. So I've used .NET Nuke, I've used various different web content management systems, but they're not like this. They don't let you do this. Now you might say to me, oh yes, but Emma, you can create a thing that is a paragraph in Word and you can embed it in multiple Word documents. And I'd go, well, bully for you, can you then work out which Word documents you've embedded that little chunk into? I wouldn't say bully for you in that nasty way, sorry. So now we're going to move on to the technical content strategy, and in my presentation that second bullet was emboldened, but it's not for some reason here, I don't know why. So before I start talking about a technical content strategy, I'd just like to give a nod in the direction of Sarah O'Keefe, who is a content strategy consultant and the founder of Scriptorium, based in North Carolina, who's written a really, I found quite a useful blog on this subject, or a document on this subject. She said, organisations need an enterprise content strategy that covers all the customer-facing information, both the persuasive content versus the informational content. So this conversation is purely limited to the technical content. I think that technical communication has a role to play in marketing, and we will cover that briefly, but basically we're talking about technical content tonight. Does that make sense? Because there's an awful lot of talk about content strategy, and most of it is talking more about, I think, about that other side, that persuasive side. And we need to claim this other side as ours. So coming back to the Streamliners content strategy for these little documents, when I thought about what we were trying to achieve, and I have to admit the strategy emerged before the thinking about what we were trying to achieve, but that's just typical of my personality. The things we wanted to achieve with this piece of documentation was consistency and quality of our work, customer success with our product. We want people, when they are using the administrator for DOT, to be able to find what they need and do the job and get out and get on with the day. We want quick turnaround. We've got an IT team who keep changing the interface and the features and the functions, and the product's constantly developing, and we need to be able to make sure that as that happens, the documentation is right up to date. We need to control our costs. Now, of course, it's quite rare, isn't it? No. And we wanted people to feel more confident in what they're doing, and one of the ways you do that is by making sure the documentation's up to date. Now, Mary's looking at me at the moment saying, Emma, when are you going to have the style guide updated? Yeah. Some of what I'm going to say tonight is aspirational. I am a builder's daughter. I have the builder's house, you know. Everybody else's work's finished, but not my own. We're getting there. Okay. Increased happiness. And finally, well, not finally, but the next phase, which is in the strategy, is integration with the system. So I want, when people are in DOT, I want them to be able to go, oh, what do they want in this field? Click, and it just has a little snippet that says, this is the blah blah. Put this here, or that. And these are not original ideas. It's just simple stuff we're trying to achieve here. So how does being granular help with my strategies? Can I just go back one step? I meant to say at this point that there are plenty of other goals that you might have as part of your technical content strategy. Sarah O'Keefe, again, she says we need to think carefully about what we need to achieve for the organisation, and then set up a content development and delivery system that supports those goals. And she suggests some other goals than the ones I've just put up there. So I'm going to just quickly run through them in case any of them ring true for you. So one of the goals you might be trying to meet for your organisation in a technical content strategy is compliance. If you can't produce the content that's required in a given market, for example, if you can't quickly keep up to date with the electrical safety standards that are in your widget manuals, it's going to burn you at a revenue level, across the board, at grassroots level. Controlling costs, for example, if translation's required, your technical content strategy needs to be streamlined or your costs are going to balloon. So that could be a really important, I'm looking at Sarah now because it's a huge thing at Orcon, that's for sure. Efficiency might be a real driver, and you can definitely employ lean methods to make your content strategy more efficient. Another one that I do tend to bang on about a bit is improving marketing and product visibility. So while we talked earlier about persuasive content versus technical content, technical content can be used to persuade a purchaser to buy your product, because they want to know if they choose your product that it's well supported, that it's well documented, that they can make it work. And we're finding, especially now in internet days, that people are actually looking for that content, finding it on their web and going, yep, this is beautiful, this is a thing of beauty. And the other one that Sarah suggested, two others that Sarah suggested, speeding up delivery, reducing the time to market. So, for example, if you can speed up the delivery of translation, the organisation gets revenue faster from those foreign markets. And finally, integrating with other content and data sources in the organisation. So understanding where information originates from, whether it's CAD drawings or other pieces of information, and being able to being able to share it efficiently with the right people in your organisation and with your end users. So there are lots of things that you might consider for your organisation in your technical content strategy. Coming back to what we were considering, how does Granular help us meet our goals? And I do want to apologise for the weird spacing between the lines. I know that that's making anybody who's fussy about layout, I know it's making your eyes bleed, and I apologise. So in terms of consistency and quality, Granular and single sourcing helps us to keep the messages the same, because we can update it in one place and it trickles through to all the other places it exists. Customers have better success with our product because the content's always up to date, in theory anyway, because we can turn around changes to the system, we can turn around the documentation faster. We can control our costs better because we're using the same screenshot in 6 places. If we update it, we only have to update it once. Increased happiness, well, actually single sourcing requires, it's a bit like a Sudoku. I think Melissa has said in 3 dimensions. So, it's fun to work with that stuff rather than just copying and pasting and having to edit the same thing in 3 different documents because you're not single sourcing it. And finally, integration with the system, that aspirational one, is we can write at field help level and combine small topics into large ones. So my vision for the online help is that we actually have written little tiny snippets that pop up when you're in the system, but we're taking those snippets and combining them into much bigger pages that give the overview of the how and the when and the process and, yeah, all of that. Okay, take-homes. Be efficient. I don't know where I learnt this in my journey into TechComm, but I've really internalised it, and I'm always trying to meet multiple needs with one killer strike. Only write what's needed. Only include pictures and flowcharts where they add value. Be clever about your captions. Make sure that you only add them if it's a good idea. Don't do it if you're translating because it'll be a real burden. And if you are doing it and you're not translating, make sure you keep the native files. Oh, I'm getting too far. I'm getting into too much detail. But, you've got to be thinking all the time, not just how much does it, what am I creating, but you've got to be thinking, what am I going to be maintaining? Because that's one of the key differences with our kind of content, is that it has a lifespan. It's not write for tomorrow's newspaper, publish, gone. I never have to worry about that again. It's still there 3 years later. wondering what you're going to do to it. Think of clever ways to cater for the different user groups. So instead of having 3 documents, think of ways, because you know you've got experienced users versus newbies, think of ways that you can single source and use dynamic HTML, for example, to have a brief view and then expand everything for a detailed view. So you're just writing one document, but you're piling in, you're squishing in the extra detail that people can drill down to if they need it. And reuse content, did I mention that? Consider the production costs. Sarah O'Keefe makes a nice point. It's not really to do with granularity, but it's still relevant. If you have to spend 2 hours doing something after you've produced a document, say you've got to go and spend 2 hours fixing up the page breaks, might be fine when you're doing one document, but if you're translating that document to 20 different languages, that's a week. So think about time involved in maintenance and production, and make sure the way you work does actually stack up financially. With your technical content strategies, start by thinking, how can we make this granular? How can we write it in such a way or create it in such a way that we can repurpose it for all the possible needs we might have? It means you're more consistent. There's quicker turnaround on updates. It's cheaper, especially if you're translating. And it's easier to integrate with other systems. And yes, I know that that's a pure view, and the other side of it is there, single sourcing 8 for sissies. But it's still, in my personal view, a worthy goal. And get the right tool. You have got to have for this a component content management system, not a content management system. It's got to be able to deal with those grains. I'm not going to tell you which one to get. I can give you some examples of component content management systems. There's the whole technology of DITA. Who's heard of DITA? Okay. So DITA stands for Darwin Information Typing something beginning with A, architecture. Sorry?
No, architecture, yeah.
And its underlying technology is XML. So I'm not going to even try and go there because I haven't used it, but it is a component content management system or technology. Another one would be Madcap, and of course I'm well known for being an Author-it user, which is another component content management system. If you're in your organisation trying to implement a technical content strategy and you're up against the marketing department saying, oh, yes, we've already got a content management system, you just need to go, bully for you, because actually what we need is not a content management system, and for some weird reason the 3 words happen to be part of what we need, but that crucial first word makes it something completely different. And that is such an important distinction. And the challenge for us when dealing with our IT departments or whoever has the authority to choose and deploy tools is explaining to them the very special needs that we have. And while I would emphasise that you might have a technical content strategy where granularity isn't really going to deliver you what all the benefits I've just outlined, but at least I hope that you can start to, well, many of you already know this, but understand the differences between granularity and component content management systems and all the other tools that are used to deploy web content, like .NET Nuke and can people suggest some other content management systems that they've used?
I've got a few, but they're all kind of tailored to particular organisations.
They often are tailored, yeah. And some of them may have even been tailored to cope with granularity. but I hadn't seen any.
Questions at the end?
Questions at the end, yeah. No difficult questions, mostly. Personally, I think you need to be able to explain what your technical content strategy is, how you're going to achieve it, and for maximum effect, I think you should at least consider a granular approach to technical content strategy. And as I said at the start, I was only going to skitter across the top of this very big subject. We've got a world-renowned expert coming to Christchurch in October, and she was actually, Rahel was principal of Intentional Design, a consultancy that works on web technical e-commerce, I don't think that's a thing, e-commerce and other complex content strategy projects. So that was, I think, her own business, but she's just been taken on as Chief Knowledge Officer at Scroll, which is a full-service web content agency based in London, specialising in content design, content strategy and delivery of large-scale projects. It sounds very full-on. And I know that she does look at all the content, including the persuasive content, but for this workshop we have asked her to focus on TechComm, and that's an area she knows well. We shout out to the androgynous little people. And questions, I've said questions, but it might be challenges. But if we could just take the challenges via email rather than in person.
Yeah, I do have a question. Might be one for Rachel in October. But it's, how do you, when you are working across the whole enterprise that might have different departments responsible for maintaining their own content, where do you start with single sourcing and persuading people that it's the way to go? Have you got any experience of that? Tips?
I think it's a very, very good question because it's difficult.
Yeah. So I've often talked about it on projects. I've never seen it happen because the departments won't play together nicely.
They won't play together nicely. And what's worse about it is that, so I was talking about quite a defined and small thing rather than an enterprise-wide. And I think the worst part of it is that, because I have experience of doing it and struggling with it.
Yeah.
So I don't have much experience of doing it and succeeding with it.
Meaning?
They come and say, just change this, and you look at it and you go, yes, but that's actually being used by these, and you think, are they, they just reviewed it last month, do they want to go through this whole conversation about, it's hard. I'm sure it can be done.
It's probably a big piece of work because it's a business case thing. So
I think the key is to get buy-in at the start that's across the organisation at the senior exec level. You can't, and this is the challenge for TechComm, is that we often try to go in at quite a low level, but with this stuff we can't. So we have to put on our big pants and go in and say, we're either doing this, driven from the top down, or we're wasting our time at the enterprise level. That's not to say you can't do it.
So your team lead or your manager, whoever's managing your whole team of writers needs to get that and go in and
I think the chief executive has to
Needs
get
to
it.
be at the, I know from working at ARA, formerly CPIT, and Adrian you might know from the university, it's got to be right from the very, very, very top. And to appoint someone to positions where there's some knowledge about that, otherwise it's hopeless. And they're typically known for being siloed anyway in their work practices, let alone the information.
Those are the two organisations that I've tried to do it.
Oh, I think that's a years and years project.
But Louise, it's not impossible, and I think Ian would be, it'd be interesting to bring you in at this point, talking about contracts with hospitals, which are at least as big as polytechnics.
And between all these multiple reviewers who love your granular content but want to change it their way.
Yes, that's right, exactly. So I think, so when we go in to do a health pathways implementation, we enter a heads of agreement right at the very top level of the organisation saying, this is what we're trying to achieve. You either buy into this vision or we've got plenty of other work to do, you just go off. And the chief executive says, and not just the chief executive, because with a hospital you have two chiefs really. You have the chief of the business and you have the chief of the medical staff. And if the senior enough people get it, then it can happen.
And the best way to sell it to them really is from that cost effective. I mean, they are talking about the dollars and the hours.
Yeah,
And,
it needs to be like
so
a
you can give
proposal.
concrete examples of how, if you change this one thing, what will it save in terms of hours? What will therefore that save in terms of money? So at that level, you really have to talk in their language. What makes a difference from their point of view? At the team level, probably, and this is one of the projects Emma's working on is the style guide side of things. So to implement it in a team level, you almost do have to have it starts with that consistency. It's an agreed consistency. If you're struggling with teams who like to do it their own, or each do it their own way, whether you can actually get some agreement to how some of it can be done the same way. And tackle that small part first.
The comms at the start, isn't it?
It's all about
And
engagement right
unfortunately,
at the
as a
start,
writer,
isn't it?
I found we were often at the bottom and brought in late, and so
Yes.
we're telling them what the system
We're
can
struggling
do.
to be senior enough. It's really annoying.
But and if I'm sorry to put the black hat on.
Come through.
Sorry to put the black hat on, but I think at executive levels in most of these large organisations, there's a woeful lack of understanding of the importance of the organisation's knowledge, intellectual knowledge, and how to manage it. And they devolve that out to their CIO/IT manager, who's been wined and dined by the people who, and there's a worldwide massive sales force for SharePoint. Part of the SharePoint sales proposition is empower your workforce to manage their own documents. Prime example, policies and procedures. And that's what you're up against. So I don't mean to be depressing, but that is it. And I've held executive positions for Canterbury Health, and trying to get senior management to really understand what the value is in the organisation's knowledge, and as we have argued as private enterprise in the recent years, trying to sell technical writing services and saying you've got to put your policies and procedures through the eye of a needle because they're going to be used thousands and thousands of times over by thousands of people. You can't have this great big devolved writing workforce producing crap, duplicating content. It's a bloody hard sell. I just hope, the answer is actually to go back to the universities and the polytechs is actually to train these future executives about the value of managing their knowledge more effectively.
There's no one at the top understands it. We don't have a chance. I was told today about Arabo, somebody, they have SharePoint, but I've never seen it.
They have SharePoint, but they've never seen it.
Yeah.
John?
Trying to convince senior executives recently, and one thing that seems to get their attention is like systems thinking. If you can say information is a system, it's got a pipeline, and it's got processes, and it's got outputs, and it doesn't just die, it gets recycled. And how efficiently can you do that?
Yeah.
It's like a system, a computer system, and it's so the SharePoint one here, everyone goes and does their own thing. It's a nightmare. Once you have content management systems, you can control the system. But I found it quite hard to do that because I was trained as in computing, and suddenly thinking I had to basically approach it like an analyst again, not actually approaching it as a TechComm. This is what I make.
But we are analysts.
Yeah, it's just
Or at least
really
we kind of should be.
Yeah.
But it's hard because we also need to be able to write.
Yeah, well, generally it's kind of like, what have you made? I'll write about it. And it's like, actually, I'm going to make you a system.
Yeah.
I'm not going to write about it. I'm going to make you a system that gets your information through a pipeline, gets updated, gets out, and then gets updated again as quickly and cheaply as possible.
That's right. And part of the key is the fact that we have to think about content as stuff that has a long ongoing life. It's not ephemeral. It's not news. It's a thing we have to keep taking out and polishing and buffing and pruning. Sorry, somebody's
No, it's just something that's probably it's for selling it. I have run up against a similar problem selling environmental solutions and what have you. Conceptually, you've got to drill down to what is the absolute bedrock of communication. What are you doing? And to me, one of those, you make sure there's the raw material for making decisions. And that's my take on it, if I wanted to put one sentence of it. And John there said about the systems, instead of having a very open SharePoint thing, which is hardly better than the gossip board on the company intranet. It's a ball of hair. I mean, that's how you could explain the presentation. Take the contents of your vacuum cleaner, tip it over the desk. That is your decision-making process.
It's got some metadata. It's got more metadata than your ball of fluff.
But, the thing is getting the pitfall, and in a way, Streamliners actually has it easier in some ways because you're up against there's a discipline there of medical science. Diabetes is diabetes is diabetes. There's not going to be a huge range of people saying, well, that's not diabetes. They might. They might. Your grey area is considerably smaller than for a lot of other people.
They all have to write things differently, though, don't they?
So sorry, I'm just thinking it's you've got to get right to the core of it and make people think, well, how do you want your organisation to make decisions? Think about that one. Almost take as long as you like. When you have the right, you want the right people getting the right information at the right time. I'm not going to say anything more of this. Just it's something I've been reading about recently, and I've actually got some. Look up mission rules. Google mission rules. Apollo 11.
Mission rules.
Mission rules.
Is that the rules that they lost and they had to go and rebuild? No.
No, it started off, and it's very, very simple tech, and they explored everything that could go wrong. It's a way of reverse engineering using text. There's a whole bunch of if-then things that they had to sort out. And what it does is it gives people a mind map. They're not locked in, you know where C is and you know you're at A. You don't have to go through B to get there. The circumstances might dictate you go via D and E, but as long as you know where the fixed points are, you can move around and make decisions which make sense. And I think that's what you've got to dig into the heads of the people you pitch at.
Well, I just hope that by giving some some of the things that I've found, that it might help with our vocabularies when we're grappling with these problems. I don't know. I'd be interested actually in some really honest feedback, perhaps via email, about whether this was what you were expecting of tonight and whether it's been useful, because we have to find a better way to get our point across as technical communicators.
I think examples are really good.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Just seeing how
yeah.
it looks. That was great seeing that.
Yeah, well, it was just one tiny example, and some of it is aspirational.
It's very,
oh, sorry, Terry, yes.
It's sort of very similar to the idea that's used in computer programming. You find what they call dynamic link libraries. Have you ever seen DLL files on a computer? It's kind of like the same sort of idea of sort of like kind of mini programs that can only be shared amongst other bigger programs and reused. This sort of
is that your idea of it's quite granular?
Yes, it's the same sort of idea, sort of like breaking things down to modules that can be recycled.
I think a lot of the underlying ideas about granularity come from programming and object-oriented databases, for sure. But the problem is it isn't quite like programming, and but that's also an advantage because it's kind of fun.
Slightly more practical question: at what level of granularity do you think it would be worthwhile becoming granular? So, if you find that you've only got, say, 1% of your content is reusable, that's obviously, quite a bit to put into that. But if it's, is there a point, the break-even point where it's worthwhile?
Diminishing returns sort of thing. Yeah, I think it's a judgment. I haven't got the formula for that one. I know what you mean, but
I mean, but there are certain advantages once you start doing that. You actually start rethinking what your content is, how it's written,
Yeah.
and breaking it down and thinking about your audience a little bit more.
Sometimes,
Context
I mean, in the medical area, sometimes that decision is down to my knowledge of the people sitting behind the content who own it and thinking, I'm just going to split this here, I'm not going to try and get them to agree. We'll just do that, and I don't care. Because there's, you know, single sourcing can be expensive if you have to run around every time you want to update something and converse with 16 different people, none of whom like each other. So it really does depend on the situation. 16 was the only part of that sentence that was an exaggeration.
You sort of talk to them, well, maybe we ought to update the content on clinical paranoia.
John?
One thing I was going to ask, do you think there's any opportunities for TechCom and for TechCommNZ and Nadiara to work across organisations and sort of in business and marketing? Because one thing I've come across is marketing very much seem to want to own content management systems for websites.
Yes, and they can have them, but they're not the same thing, are they?
No, but you start talking to marketing people, content management system, branding, websites, hours, leave it alone.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, component content management systems are different.
There's a very good article if you're having this battle at your workplace called "A Whale is Not a Fish." I've forgotten who it's by, but it was one of the things that I discovered upon, and it's like, and he just talks, he's very data focused for his sins, but it's a really good article on why a CMS and a CCMS, unfortunately, they're such similar terms that you think they're similar things, and they're just not. And a whale is not a fish. Yeah. Okay, one more, if anybody wants to say anything more, and then I'm going to have a drink. No, I'm not, I'm just going to stop the iPadding. Thank you very much.
Are you going to do thank you to Emma for speaking?
Oh, that's right, yes. Oh, where's my bottle of wine? Thank you so much for coming along. We've got some plans for next month, but I haven't quite finalised them yet, so just keep watching your inbox for the next exciting invitation. It could be something completely different. That's it. It's not more.